G'day groovers, rockers, and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today, we are talking with Newcastle music legend, Rick Pointon. Rick spent his first 10 years of life in England before moving to Australia with his family in 1956. His arrival in Australia also marked the arrival of rock and roll, and so he spent his early days in Australia listening to the likes of Johnny O'Keefe and the Shadows. As a teenager in the 60s, Rick would play in many local Newcastle bands such as the Mystery Men and the Second Thoughts. However, it is perhaps the band he played with in the 70s, Benny and the Jets, that he is most remembered around Newcastle for. More recently, Rick has written a book called Hey Rock and Roll, which covers the Newcastle music scene in the 60s and 70s and also covers his own journey in music. G'day Rick, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much, Jack.
Let's start off at the beginning, Rick. I've read you were born in England in 1946. Do you remember much about your childhood in England?
I do, actually. Yeah, I do. I do remember quite a bit. And when I came out, it was good. I had a lot of family and, I remember going to Blackpool and various places. So, yeah, it was good, yeah.
What kind of music was happening during your childhood? Before you came to Australia, so those first 10 years, what kind of music was happening in your life at that point?
Well, it's funny, as you know, after the war, there wasn't... I remember hearing a couple of rock and roll tracks in England, and I remember those, like Shake, Rattle and Roll sort of thing and Rock Around the Clock. But when we came to Australia, there was a real mixture. Some rock was just starting to happen. Certainly Buddy Holly. I remember early Buddy Holly, but there was a lot of novelty songs in those days, like the hula hoop song and all that sort of stuff, but folk songs. It was a real mixture back in the 50s, really, but rock and roll was coming through, and like Johnny O'Keefe didn't have his first rock and roll song, Wild One. That was 58. That was probably the first Australian rock and roll song to chart.
Of course, you mentioned those Bill Haley records there that you heard in the UK. I mean, do you have any memory of when you heard them for the first time? Has that memory stayed with you? Did it impact you?
Yeah, you'd be the same. I mean, if you like music, you remember where you were driving when you heard certain songs. And I remember being in my auntie's kitchen in England when I heard Bill Haley, and I thought, holy dooly. So I was only a kid, but I do remember that, yeah.
You moved to Australia with your family in 1956. What inspired your family to move to Australia?
Well, actually, Dad was injured and not well after the war, and he worked in the potteries in the Midlands, and it was really, it's been cleaned up now, but it was really grimy and industrial. It was one of the industrial heartlands, and the sky was black with smoke from all these pottery kilns. I can still remember it. Everyone would be coughing on the streets. It really wasn't a good situation, and the doctor told Dad that if he didn't get to a better climate, he'd be dead by 50. And the next night, they were sitting freezing, watching telly, and on came a little show about Christmas in Australia and Bondi Beach, and they thought that'll do us. So didn't know anybody out here, but so a huge move. I don't think I could do it. I can't believe you could leave a huge family, and come out where you don't know anybody, but the doctor said he should try and do that. But not only that, they thought it would be better for us kids, which, we're all grateful. So it worked out really well.
Yeah, and I'm kind of thinking too, how different was 1950s Australia to 1950s England at that point?
It was a lot different, I would say. When we came out, I think London had more people than all of Australia. I think the population in Australia was 9 million, if I'm right about that. It really was different. It was a lot more, a lot more of the streets were gravel, and it was really, even places where we lived when we came out, gravel roads, more country-ish, really more slower lifestyle. Yeah, it would be quite different, yeah.
Of course, when you got to Australia, you lived in Lake Macquarie. When did you say to yourself you wanted to do music? What was that point when you said that to yourself?
Well, I always loved it, and I started collecting records really early, and that was my thing, was collecting records. Mum and Dad gave me a little record player, and couple of records, and I've still got the same records that they gave me for about my, 11th, 12th birthday or something, and I've still got those, and I started collecting records if I was at a school fete or something and they had cheap records, so I started collecting records. So I'd always loved music, but my really was when the Shadows had Apache, and I love the Shadows, and a lot of, as you'd know, all the big English musos, like everyone from Eric Clapton to Brian May to Phil Collins, all these guys, they all say that Shadows were what got them. They were all playing in Shadows bands, basically, and that was the same in Australia. Every suburb had a band, and you'd all be playing Shadows or Ventures and Wayne Eddy. It was all instrumentals, not many vocals, or if you didn't have a vocalist, you just play instrumentals all night, which, no one would ever do these days, but that's just what it was.
I've read it was Hank Marvin from the Shadows that inspired you to buy your first guitar in 1962. Am I right on that?
Yeah. Well, the Shadows themselves, Hank Marvin. And then I switched over to bass. And but the Shadows certainly. Still love them, still play. I think I got every Shadows album and single ever made. I love the Shadows and saw them a few times when they came to Australia. But almost every muso of my vintage, or you could probably say certainly every muso of my vintage, would have grown up learning Shadows songs.
Taking it back to your mindset as a kid then, when the Shadows were coming out, I mean, why do you think they had such a big impact on, like, kids of your generation, like when you were that age? Yeah. It
was different. It was different. I mean, yeah, they had, Cliff Richard was having hits and other singers were having hits. And by then, there was a lot of Americans having hits like your Bobby Rydells, Bobby Darrens, Del Shannons, all these. But the Shadows, what really happened here was, because we were in the British Commonwealth, it's like in Canada, the same thing. The Shadows were big in Canada. They were big here. They were big in South Africa and New Zealand, but never in America. It was a British Commonwealth thing. Like Cliff was bigger here than he was bigger in America. In those days, he didn't have a hit in America. So Shadows, it just caught on, and it was more of a male thing. I'm not saying females didn't like the Shadows music, because they do, but it was a real male thing.
By this point, 1962, I think you're around 15 maybe, if I'm right. I might be wrong on that maths.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. I mean, had you seen many live concerts by that point? I know some of the old...
No, I hadn't seen any by then.
Okay. Yeah, when was your first one then?
Well, in the 60s, I saw plenty. Like the Searchers came to Newcastle in 64. Searchers and Peter and Gordon and Del Shannon. Who else was on that? Dinah Lee, Eden Kane. So they started coming here after the British invasion. I'd go and see other local acts, Johnny O'Keefe and Cole Joy. It was basically when I started working and I had a bit of money. I'd go and see whoever I could.
And of course, by that point, you mentioned 1964, but of course, the year before that, you joined your first group, Mystics, I think it was called. How'd you come?
The Mystics, yeah.
How'd you come to join your first group?
Well, I was just practicing around with a few local mates. Every suburb had at least one band. Really, it was like it was a fad, which I suppose it was. It was new, and hadn't been done before as often as this. And then the Shadows were different, and I can remember saying to other guys in another band in the next suburb, we've just learned both sides of the Shadows' new single. And they said, we haven't learned the flip side yet. So it was a real competition, and it became that way a bit with the Beatles and Stones, etc. When the records came out, everyone would rush in and buy them and try and be the first to play them. But I was just practicing around the house with a few other local guys, and I saw an ad in the paper, this band looking for a bass player, so I applied for that and got the job, and that was the Mystics. So that was the sort of start of it.
And of course, you mentioned the Beatles there, and I know they had a big impact as well. I think you were on a bus at Glendale waiting to go home one day, and She Loves You came over the airwaves. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, what a great memory you've got. Yeah, I can remember that like it was yesterday, She Loves You. So that was obviously 63. And the Beatles, they changed everything. It's really weird. It's hard to explain how much everywhere you went, everything all day, people were talking about the Beatles. It was just absolutely unbelievable. But it was so new, and of course, it just became a fad, and all the newspapers and the women's weeklies, everything, all you could see was Beatles. It was unbelievable. But they were certainly, the best, and there'll never be anything like them again. So it was great. But a lot of other great bands like the Searchers. I love the Kinks. We used to play heaps of Kinks, Stones, the Who. I mean, we were just spoiled for choice, really.
The year after, in '64, you joined the Mystery Men. Am I right on that?
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah, I did. Joined the Mystery Men, and then we changed our name to the Tremors. And I started to get a few more better gigs, and got a couple of gigs with a couple of radio stations that had beach concerts and things like that. And so that was just another little step up. The guys were older than me, so I learned a bit from them, and it was good, yeah.
In saying that, Tillman, you mentioned how many people there were that were, there was a band for every suburb. I mean, was there a lot of places for young people in the early 60s to play at?
Hundreds. It was ridiculous. But it was really strange. People wouldn't do it today, I don't think. Community hall dances. And even when Johnny O'Keefe started at the Hornsby Police Boys Club and all these sort of things, community club dances. So we would play every week, never anything alcoholic. Kids paid, not much money to get in, and all they could buy is Coke and maybe made up orange cottage drink with water and bags of chips. That was it. And so all these people would go along, no alcohol, anything. I mean, a lot of the older guys would go to the pub first, I suppose. But so every community club had community hall had a Friday night dance or Saturday night dance. Even out in the suburbs where I grew up around Argenton, Friday night dance. Edgeworth had one, Cardiff had one, Warners Bay had one, Toronto had one. It was unbelievable. A lot of kids didn't have cars at that stage yet, so kids would walk or get a bus, and the big crowds at all of them. So there were so many places to play that, you learn quickly and you improve, hopefully. And so it was just a really good time. And you could play, even in those times, you could play 2 or 3 nights a week easily.
I think the band's name changed to The Others in 1965, and I was having a look at the old photos of you guys when you were called The Others, and it sounds like you guys might have been trying to dress like the Beatles a little bit. Am I right on that?
Oh, everyone, you had to. I mean, it's crazy, but yeah, you had to. And there we were playing on Nobby's Beach in 40-degree heat in suits and ties. I mean, ridiculous, ridiculous. But that's what it was. Whatever the Beatles and the British invasion bands did, that's what we did. And then the Stones changed that the Stones went away from. They started like that, and they had waistcoats and stuff, and but then they got away from that and said, oh, look, I remember saying at practice, look, they're going on stage in their ordinary gear. Oh, how terrible. But it wasn't long before everyone was doing it. But, yeah, shirts and suits and ties.
I've read too, Rick, that the Others was like more of a support band for a lot of groups like the Easy Beats, Masters Apprentices when they came down to Newcastle. Am I right on that?
Well, yeah, we got up to the the top of the food chain in Newcastle, and we were really busy and working all the time. So if any of the big bands came to town, we used to get asked to open the show or support the show. Or a lot of times we'd do that, and we'd also supply the backing to, John Farnham or whoever if they didn't have any backing with them. So that was really good.
Not long after, I think 1966, you guys changed your name again to The Second Thoughts, and you actually recorded a single in that year as well. And I was wondering, do you remember much about the recording of that single?
Yeah, totally. Fortunately, my grey matter's still working at the moment, but I can remember it well. I mean, because we were fortunate. We recorded it at the same time as the Bee Gees were recording Spicks and Specks, and so we used the same studio at Hurstville. It's demolished now, but it's become pretty famous. Sinclair Studio, and within an old butcher shop. And, we were produced by Nat Kipner, who produced Spicks and Specks, and a lot of early Bee Gees, wrote a lot of early stuff. He wrote Lonnie Lee's I Found a New Love. He co-wrote Surfside, #1 hit for the Denver Men. He was, really clever musically person. So yeah, we recorded it with him because we played in Sydney a lot, the Second Thoughts, and did a lot of gigs around the Cross and places. But because we weren't down there all the time, which you had to be if you were going to try and crack it, and it sold a bit in Sydney, but it actually made #1 in Newcastle, and sold a lot here, which was really good, yeah. And up and down the coast and up the valley where we were playing.
When you were recording those two songs, Run Back Home, I think it was the A-side, The World Keeps Going Round was the B-side.
Run Back. Well, actually, The World Keeps Going Round was meant to be the A-side, and the record company botched it up. And
okay.
But it didn't matter because in those days they were both played a lot. So it used to be slash and both sides. It would say Run Back Home / The World Keeps Going Round. But The World Keeps Going Round was the side that most people knew. Yeah, the record company. The World Keeps Going Round was written by Ray Davies of the Kinks. But the record companies botched that too, and they put Davis instead of Davies.
Oh, okay.
So they made a few mistakes, but but it was nice to have, and it's very collectible now on the Down Under label.
Yeah. I think I think I did read about that. Like they cost like $200 or something to get a copy or something like that. Yeah.
It goes. Well, you don't see it often, but it's always $80 or $150 and $200. I've said I can't even afford to buy my own records now, which is very sad.
When you guys were recording the songs, I mean, was that on? Like that would have been done pretty much live in the studio, like mono tape. Am I right on that?
Yeah, you're spot on. It was probably 2-track. You could bounce down, so it was basically live, and then I think I added the vocal. So it was live, and then I got another go to do the vocal. So that was it.
And was there many recording studios in the Newcastle area at that time? Like was that?
No.
Yeah.
There was two. There was Vista at Wickham. And Alan Bourne had a studio in Cooks Hill where you could make a private record. They were sort of they were 45s, but they were like acetates. And we made one there and the others before we changed our name. And radio played it a bit, even though it wasn't an official release. And we sold a lot at our gigs. So quite a few local bands recorded at those two. Vista in particular recorded a few different bands, and it was same thing. It was basically live.
I've read too that you guys were the backing band for the Bee Gees when they played Civic Park in 1966. Am I right on that?
Yeah, spot on. One of their very last shows before they headed overseas, and that was incredible. People don't know, but the Bee Gees played a lot in Newcastle, a lot. They played a lot everywhere. I mean, every time you turn the telly on, there was the Bee Gees doing, and I think they overexposed themselves because they had to. It was a small country. Well, it was a small population, and every time you turn the telly on, it was the Bee Gees. But I always loved them, and when we got the offer to do the show, there used to be an annual thing in Newcastle called the Matara every year, Matara procession all the way down Hunter Street. And then Civic Park used to be a big show. The radio station had put on a big concert. And because we were, one of the top bands in town at the time, we were often asked to appear, supply the backing to any artist that needed it, and do our own spot. So that was exactly the time when The World Keeps Going Round, our record, was #1 locally. So it was perfect for us to do that. As you would have read in the book, it was the exact moment that the Bee Gees had recorded Spicks and Specks.
#1 record locally. I mean, how many records roughly did that mean you sold then? Like to get #1 locally in Newcastle, like do you have any idea?
Look, I don't actually. I don't, because it's here. The radio station, the way they used to do it, they used to ring all of the record shops up every Monday and find out how many they'd sold. That's the way they did it. But I really couldn't say. But in those days, records were the thing. It would have sold a lot. I mean, that was a teenager's number one thing in those days, was buying records. And because they didn't have a heap of money, it was buying singles, 45s. A lot of them couldn't afford an album, but the singles were about $1 or a bit less. You know, everyone, it was just like, oh, what did you buy this week? Oh, I bought that. What did you buy? Oh, I bought the Beatles' new single or the Kinks or whatever. And that's what everyone was talking about, and that's what everyone was doing. That was the main entertainment.
In saying that too, I mean, after that single came out, the single you guys did, I mean, how long were you guys playing for after that? Like, how long was the band going for after that, Second Thoughts?
Late 68.
Yeah, okay.
Late 68,
yeah, right.
we wound up, and one of our guys, Graham Conlon, was offered a gig in Normie Rowe's band. So he took that and went on to a lot of bigger and better things. The rest of us stayed locally and evolved into another couple of bands, yeah. Directly after the Second Thoughts, I had a band called Bittersweet, and then straight into another band called Keg, and we were doing Blood, Sweat and Tears in Chicago with a brass section, and that was what was sort of happening at the time. So they were two really good bands, and then Keg evolved into Benny and the Jets.
1974 here, I mean, Benny and the Jets is formed. Well, what inspired you guys to have a 1950s kind of sounding sound, so to say, in the 70s? Like, what inspired you to do that? Yeah.
Well, my record collection, I guess. I always loved the old rock and roll, still had it, still played it. I knew there were a few bands in America starting to play it. There was no one in Australia playing it. This was before Old 55, or there was no one in Australia playing it, but I knew. And then all of a sudden in America, there was the Happy Days TV series, and all of a sudden there was a bit of a resurgence happening in America on the old rock and roll. And I always loved it, and I always had the records, and that's when I thought Keg had broken up. And when we were playing in Keg, I had this idea that led into Benny and the Jets. And I said to the guys, you know, I think this rock and roll, the old rock and roll, is going to come back a bit. And so we learned a whole medley in Keg that went about, I think, 22 minutes or something, I still remember, and was a medley of, you know, Bill Haley and all old stuff, all pre-Beatles, and a lot of Buddy Holly, Bill Haley, that sort of, and a lot of doo-wop, the Black American doo-wop groups, that sort of stuff. It used to go over really, really big when we did it in Keg, and I thought we should do a whole band of this. I think it'll work, and that's where it happened from there.
I've read too, in 1974, the same year, you opened your own record shop. Am I right on that?
Yeah, perfect for me, as long as I didn't take all the profits home. But yeah, it was a great era for having a record shop. I mean, the 70s, Jack. I mean, you know, the albums in the 70s, the Eagles, the Doobies, Steely Dan, you know, you could go on and on. America, all fabulous albums, and then ABBA came out, so lots of sales, lots of great Australian bands in the 70s, of course. It was a good time to have a record shop. Now, there's none, you know. Many, not many anyway.
So I'm guessing you're working at the record shop of the day, and of the night you're playing with Benny and the Jets. Is that kind of what was? Yeah, okay. Yep.
Yeah. I never did, rightly or wrongly, I never did chuck in my day job. A couple of the guys in Benny and the Jets did, because a couple of years there, we were working over 300 nights a year. We worked 6 nights a week every week, and a lot of weeks we worked 7, and sometimes you'd do a Sunday arvo or Saturday arvo. The only night we sometimes got off used to be a Monday, and even then you'd end up doing a school dance. So it was just, there was so much work, and yeah, the band was so big, but there was just work everywhere.
Yeah. How much were bands getting paid back then? Do you remember?
Oh, it's hard to say with the cost of living, but good money. A lot of bands back then would be getting more money than bands would be today. I mean, which is crazy. Like there's a few bands around town that'll get reasonable money, but not a lot. And they often laugh and they can't believe But it wouldn't have been, I mean, I've got some old paperwork here and there where we were getting $500, $600. Some big shows would be more. Yeah, but 200, maybe 300 for school dance, which doesn't sound much, but you're talking about 50 years ago.
Yeah.
40 years ago. And so if you work that out now, it would be good money.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of guys chucked in their day job and they just were professional musicians. And there were heaps of guys in Newcastle and all around Australia that could make a good living by doing it, playing just about every night. You know, you might get a weekend afternoon show. There's just work everywhere.
I heard you guys played the Star Hotel as well. I mean, in the 70s when it was really rocking, I mean, what was it like?
Well, I didn't like the Star Hotel. I loved it. We were the first rock band to play there, and I played there more than any other musician. And I loved it. And I was responsible for the Star having rock and roll bands because the Star was a jazz pub. And it took me months to wear Don and Leslie down. And in the end, they only gave us a gig to shut me up and get rid of me. And I'd ring them every day. And they laughed about it for years and years. I'd ring them every day. In fact, on the front of my book, I've got all these quotes by different people, and I've got a quote from Donnie Graham. He said, "Rick, this rock and roll revival stuff won't work. The Star Hotel is a jazz pub." He soon ate those words, and so they gave us a try. I said, "Look, we'll do a free night, Give us a free night." So they didn't even want to do that. But in the end, Don said, "Come in on a Tuesday." Well, Tuesday's the dead night everywhere. So we did, and we took all our families and friends, and there was a few people there when we started. Otherwise, it was dead, and then a few more people came in, and it was great. And Don and Leslie said, "Oh, this isn't too bad at all." They said, "Okay, well, we'll try a better night. We'll try Wednesday." So we did that. That got better, and within a couple of months, we were playing Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and it was packed. You couldn't move. In fact, if you didn't get there, this sounds crazy. If you didn't get there at 5 o'clock, there weren't many seats, but you wouldn't get a seat. But we'd start at 8 and people would turn up at 5 to get in. So it was just a never to be seen again sort of scene. It was just unbelievable.
After you guys formed in 1974, you guys recorded your first single. I think it was the A-side was Hey Rock and Roll. There we go. B-side.
Yeah, that was the second one. The first one was We Put the Bump in the Bump.
Oh, okay. I've got it around the wrong way. Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah, but that was the second one, Hey Rock and Roll. We did 2 at Copperfield and an album, and all 3 went to number 1. Sold enormous amounts, which was great. I never got any money for it, but enormous amounts. And then I knew Cole Joy, so when the band split and there was we had a different lineup, I should say. We didn't stop playing, we just changed lineup, and we left Copperfield, and I knew Cole Joy, so the next 2 records I did at ATA.
With the Copperfield singles and the album, I mean, do you remember where that was recorded, like what studio?
Yeah, sure. Copperfield had its own studio, Sussex Street, in a building that was the old corn exchange, of all things. An old, very old building called the Corn Exchange in Sussex Street. So, and a bloke called David A. Gibson had that. So we recorded those there, and ATA was at Cole Joy's big. That was when there was a lot more tracks to use. Even Copperfield was only a two track studio.
That 50s inspired stuff would probably been easier to do with 2-track. Like it would have been.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, you could, don't want to be too technical for the listeners, but you could bounce down. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep,
but you could bounce down and put another instrument onto the track. But each time you did that, you lost a bit of quality.
Yeah.
But it was enough, and we could overdub. We overdubbed some brass and a piano onto the album, and so yes, it was still okay for what we were doing. But Cole's Joy studio around in Glebe was state of the art. Glebe Point Road, he was, and it was a fabulous studio.
Why do you think like audiences of the 70s, like that point in the 70s, were so like loved that 50s sounding music? What
I think it was it's happy music. I mean, it'll never not be popular. And even today, I saw a friend of ours sent a video of his grandson playing in his band, which was playing all new stuff. And in the middle of it, they played Blue Suede Shoes and old rock and roll, and the crowd loved it. So there's always going to be somebody playing it somewhere that could even, everything, as you know, everything goes in cycles and circles, and it could all happen again that there's another big rock and roll revival. There's hundreds of bands playing nothing but the Beatles and hundreds of bands playing ABBA and the tribute bands. So I think nostalgia and people love what they grew up with. They're always close to what they grew up with. And I was just lucky. I just grew up in fabulous time.
And a lot of young people are getting back into vinyls, they're getting back into old music. I mean, that's got to be great for you. Yeah. That's got to be great for you to see, young people appreciating, great music like from from years before they were even born. I mean, that's got to be great for you to see.
It is, and I get a real buzz out of that. I mean, you can go to the markets and there's people selling vinyl everywhere, and you can see young uni students. You might follow them around and they're going through, oh, look at this, here's an old Beatles or an old Kinks or Stones or whatever. And my son collects vinyl. He looks for old Neil Young and Deep Purple and things on vinyl. And as you know, vinyl is worth a lot more than a CD. Yeah. The CD, you don't get much for a second-hand CD, but a lot of second-hand vinyl you do if it's in good nick. I've grown up loving Glenn Miller and the big bands and a lot of old jazz, and that's way before my time. Yeah, and I still have a heap of old Glenn Miller 78s and Louis Armstrong and those sort of... So if you like music, I think, a good song is a good song, isn't it? It doesn't matter when it was made or when it was written.
Absolutely agree with that, Rick. No, absolutely. And I've read too that you recently, well, maybe a few years ago, I think maybe 2 years ago, you sold like 30,000 of your vinyls. Yeah. I mean, after selling all those, I mean, do you have a favourite one that's still in your collection, like a favourite vinyl or a few favourite vinyls?
Oh, look, I do. Yeah. I mean, those records I sold, they weren't in my main collection. I'd still probably have, I don't know, I'd still probably have 10 or 15,000. But that was my second lot that I used to go through every now and again and think, oh yeah, I'll keep that one. I'll have a listen to that one. But I mean, look, there's so many. I make people laugh. I say, this is in my top 10. This is in my top 10. And then they say, you must have 100 in your top 10. But there'll be a lot of Beatles in it. But not only that, Beatles or Kinks, love the Kinks, the Stones, Dylan. But I mean, even saying that, I buy a lot of new stuff. Like I said, if it's good, it's good. So there's a lot of good Australian stuff. It's a bit sad. There's a lot of really good stuff around, but people don't get to hear about it. You've got to go finding it a lot of times because a lot of it doesn't get heard. I mean, you play a lot of lesser-known stuff, don't you?
Yeah, often. Yeah, we do. Yep.
Thankfully, stations like, 2NUR-FM, where people are more liable to hear something a bit different and think, oh, that's great, I'll go and look for that album or I'll go and buy that. Yeah. But a lot of the other stations stick to format and you hear the same stuff over and over and over.
Yeah.
So it's great what you're doing, Jack.
Well, thanks, Rick. No, well, I totally agree with you. I think Australia had some great songs. I mean, definitely during the 60s and 70s. I mean, a few people on the show have kind of mentioned this too. I mean, it seems to me like Australia, when in the 60s and 70s, there's great tracks that, a lot of people know in Australia, but they never really made it big overseas or, I don't know. I don't think Australia ever really got the recognition musically, internationally that it deserved because we had some great stuff, Rick. What? Yeah.
You're quite right. I think I think people are just becoming more aware of it now and even looking for it. Australian music of the 60s and 70s and into the 80s is very collectible overseas. And a lot of places like, Britain, America, Germany are collecting, you're right, so many Australian records, a lot of prog rock. I mean, stuff like Tamam Shud and... that was an old Newcastle. They came from Newcastle, of course. Yeah. People like that, very collectible overseas. And when you think about it, I mean, Easy Beats Friday in my mind is considered by anybody, and certainly David Bowie, one of the all-time greats of the 60s. I mean, that's incredible. And there's been about, as you would know, like everyone from Gary Moore, there's been a heap of covers of Friday in My Mind. It's considered a classic. I think a lot of the Australian bands were good enough to make it overseas, but either bad management or they ran out of money but the Loved Ones, I think the Loved Ones at the time, I think they were in the same category as the Stones and the Kinks. I mean, the Loved Ones were just brilliant, and they were so unique and so different. I think they could have been huge overseas, but that was the problem. I couldn't believe it. When we did a gig with the Easy Beats when they came back from England the first time, and they were broken, they were destitute, and they were sick of it. I couldn't believe how a band that had Friday in My Mind had no money. They had no money. They were broke. You know, bad management, cost too much to stay there. I mean, Easy Beats, I think a lot of their other songs that they had hits with here, like Women, and they could have been big over there, but for some reason they started afresh. But Friday in My Mind is a killer.
I wanted to mention too, I mean, of course, a lot of the musos in Newcastle already know about it, but your book, Hey Rock and Roll, I wanted to know, like, when did you first get the idea to write that book?
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, it was a funny thing. People have always told me I should write a book. Like, they'd ask me about, a lot of musos would say, oh, did you really play with the Easy Beats? Did you really play with Radio Birdman? Or I'd say, they'd say you should write a book. And I always put it in the back of my mind. With working all the time, I've always worked, and my last job, as you know, was at 2NURFM, and I loved it. I loved it. I used to present a little rock and roll segment every Saturday afternoon for quite a while, and I love working there. Great people. But I was too busy, really. So when I retired, I thought if I'm ever going to do it, now's the time. So I tried to catch up with a lot of people just to tell them I was doing it, and it's been brilliant and gone better than I dared to expect. I thought if I get my money back, I'll be over the moon. But it's still kicking on, and I spoke at a Probus Club yesterday, and people get me to come and talk at Lions clubs and View clubs, and I always sell some books, and they're lovely people, because what it is, the music that they grew up with, everyone loves the music that they grew up with. So I'm fortunate that people love that era.
Because I mean, it's beautifully put together, Rick. I mean, it's a it's a beautiful package, like the book, like and how it all fits together. I mean, did you have a lot to do with that, or was that more the publisher?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jack. Totally. The cover was my idea. I had good help from a local bloke called Paul Newey, who's always been in printing, but the whole idea was mine, and I typed every word with two fingers, and I've always, collected. Helen's always going crook. She says I'm a hoarder, but I've got boxes and boxes. That's why I wanted to use all of the different posters and things, and a lot of books that you buy, they just have a few photos in the middle, but I wanted to put the photos next to where I was talking about. It wasn't cheap to make, as you said. It's lovely made and glossy, and it's a big book, but it took a long time. But I'm so glad I did it like that because at least I would have liked to have got some more photos in, but there's about 700 of them in there. But yeah, it was good to do, good exercise, still selling really well. So that's heartening, and it's always getting mentioned on social media, and people, it's in not every, but a lot of news agents and bookshops around locally. So it's kicking on really well. I'm really pleased.
Well, are you working on anything at the moment, like music-wise, writing-wise? Like, are you working on anything at all?
Still been doing the occasional jingle and things, and I'm still teaching myself the ukulele, but I'm not playing in a band at the moment or anything. But I'd never say never, and a friend's been asking me to think about playing with him, so I may. But I'm still very busy with this. Like I said yesterday, I was out doing a talk. Yeah, I'm still busy doing quite a bit for the book, but when that sort of slows down, I might look, might get the band back together.
Well, Rick, I want to just thank you so much for making the time. I mean, I think we've spoken about such good things about Newcastle, like the music scene in Newcastle, your life in music, and of course, Hey Rock and Roll. Thanks for making the time.
Jack, I can't thank you enough, mate. Your knowledge is excellent, and really enjoyed it. So thank you for being interested.
That was Newcastle music legend and member of Benny and the Jets, Rick Pointon. If you haven't already got a copy of Rick's book, Hey Rock and Roll, you can get it through most book chains in the Newcastle area. Remember to share this show with other music fans, and if you really enjoyed this edition, let us know. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Vinyl Vibes, and to all you music lovers out there, stay groovy.